This video's thumbnail was done by Chaos Cosmo. Today is February 24th, 2024. On this day 7 years ago, a game called Hollow Knight was released by Team Cherry, a small indie studio from Australia. This was no ordinary game that they had created. It was a genre-defining Metroidvania, and is one of the best indie games ever crafted. It is a game that permanently changed how I look at video games. I'm SoulCakeLive, and this is why I love Hollow Knight. When I first found out about Hollow Knight, it was by complete accident. I never heard anyone speak of this title, nor have I seen it anywhere else on the internet. Once I saw the promotional material and the cost, the deal had been sealed. You are thrown right into the game with the opening sequence in King's Pass. Aside from one, maybe two tutorial texts, you are on your own and need to explore the somber and strange kingdom of Hallownest. Striking enemies with a nail will raise your soul gauge in the top left, which you can use to regenerate health and, later on, cast spells. Admittedly, I did not have that many games under my belt where you have to piece the world together as you go. Depending on how you play, so many things can end up happening all at once to the point where it becomes a little overwhelming. I would find an enemy that's too strong for me, or a pit I can't jump across, but in time I realized that there must be an item I can find that would let me reach areas that are otherwise not possible just yet. Hollow Knight is a Metroidvania. In case you don't know what that is, they're non-linear action-adventure games usually in the form of platformers that are focused on exploration and non-linear utility progression. Games like these, essentially. Moving on. The Forgotten Crossroads, again, can be a little overwhelming to explore at first, but it's designed in such a way that you'll find new things as you go that will ultimately lead you towards the right path. Leave no stone unturned as you explore, and of course, you can buy maps of all the areas one by one and update them as long as you have the pen. Most of the essentials that you need are in the very first area. One of my biggest aha moments when playing for the first time was returning to the very point where it starts, once I had the Mothwing Cloak and the Mantis Claw. Respectively, they are the dash and the wall jump, and are among one of the many fancy upgrades that you can acquire in the world of Hallownest. Just walking through the areas while listening to Christopher Larkin's impeccable soundtrack is reason enough for me to just open the game again. Hollow Knight hits you with a rather somber vibe at first, to allude to the mystery and uncertainty of Hallownest's caves and creatures, but always shakes it up with an upbeat area like Green Path or the Crystal Peak. Once you acquire even more movement upgrades like the Monarch Wings and the Crystal Heart, traversing Hallownest becomes a piece of cake, especially when using the stags and trams to fast travel. You're meant to get lost, and that's part of the journey. It goes without saying, but Hollow Knight is far from a short game. The bench. When you play Hollow Knight for the very first time, you are going to die. A lot. Be it from a boss, an enemy, or some pesky obstacle in your way. It is inevitable. No matter how it happens, you'll always end up right back at the bench, ready to plan your next move. The amount of deaths I had within the first 5 hours would have been more than enough for me to shelve the game permanently, is what I would say if I wasn't playing Hollow Knight. When you lose all of your health, so too do you lose your currency, Geo, as well as a part of your soul gauge until you strike down your shade, the echo of your previous death. Dying again without reclaiming it will take a huge hit to your Geo, and I'd be lying if I said this didn't happen to me at least once. With each death, you learn something new about the game so that you're more prepared for your next attempt. This is where people usually like to compare Hollow Knight to the many Souls-like games that are out there, and it makes sense. Remember earlier when I said that traversal becomes a piece of cake once you have all the movement upgrades? Well, all of that will be put to the test when you reach the White Palace. It's almost as if I'm playing a completely different yet familiar game, especially with all those buzzsaws. If you hadn't mastered the nail bounce at this point in the game, you will be punished for it. On top of that, once you clear the game once, you will unlock a new mode known as Steel Soul Mode. It's Hollow Knight's fancy way of offering a permadeath experience. This uncovers a whole other layer to the game that you may not have considered as much as you did previously. Planning out your every move. One very small misstep could be curtains for your entire run. So plan meticulously. Try different charm combinations. Upgrade that nail and hit the caves. And maybe die trying and start over. I know I did a lot of times. Normally in these types of videos that I do on the channel, I provide a bit of backstory detailing my introductory experiences with the game in question as the very first topic. But for Hollow Knight, my experiences were complicated enough to the point where it didn't feel fitting to put that in the beginning of the video. Trust me on this one and I'll explain. I first discovered Hollow Knight by complete accident, as I mentioned earlier. I was scouring around Steam, looking for games to buy during the summer sale of 2017. I ended up buying 3 games: Fez, Cluster Truck, and of course, Hollow Knight. I don't remember where on Steam I saw it, whether it was in the under $10 section or somewhere else on my store page, but like I said before, I took a single glance at the art style from one of the trailers and was immediately sold. I had paid $9.89 for the game, $5 down from the original price. Little did I know that it would be one of the best $10 I would ever spend. The only issue was that I was playing on a Mac. A MacBook Pro from 2010. I'm sure you can guess where this is going. And so, an already difficult game became even more difficult. A lesser individual would have most likely given up, but not me. I played through the game to the very end, up until I reached the Hollow Knight. It wasn't the most optimal experience, but even still, I was having a really good time with it. I probably would have died way less if I wasn't using keyboard controls, but I still managed. However, things went catastrophic when I finally reached the end. I couldn't finish the game. Not because I was bad at it, but because the final boss was invisible. Piece of shit, laptop. So what did I do about it? Well, to put it simply, I waited. And waited. And waited. Until the Switch version finally dropped on June 12th, 2018. Team Cherry really likes to shadow drop their updates and releases, and this was no different. It was known ever since its initial release that the game would be coming to the Switch. Even funnier is the fact that it was Reggie Fils-Aimé who announced the release of the console port during Nintendo's E3 2018 Direct, the same presentation where Super Smash Bros. Ultimate was fully unveiled. This gave the game a huge awareness boost to those who had not heard about it previously. No frame drops, no performance issues. I could finally experience the game the way it was intended. Thanks, Reggie.
Hollow Knight today.
Ever since its release, Hollow Knight also received 4 free content updates. 3 of these were DLC expansions, and one of them was a mega patch. Hidden Dreams added the Dream Gate as an easy way to get around Hallownest really fast. Think of it like this game's version of the Travel Medallion from Breath of the Wild. It also added a couple more boss fights. The second major update was the Grim Troop. This added an entirely new side quest to the game where you can call upon a cult fueled by fire. Along with a plethora of brand new charms, it also added 2 additional boss fights that can be found in said quest, along with a few other neat things, such as the infamous Path of Pain. The aforementioned Mega Patch came in the form of the Lifeblood update, which added tons of visual improvements to the game in preparation for the console release of the game, all while tweaking various things throughout Hallownest, especially the Hive area. And finally, Godmaster, the boss rush mode to end all boss rushes. You can refight any boss of your choosing, and once you finish the first 4 Pantheons, your final challenge is the Pantheon of Hallownest, where you have to fight every single boss in the game, all the way up to a harder version of the Radiance. This challenge kicked my ass in more ways than one. There were so many times where I wanted to give up, but I pulled through persevered, and ultimately triumphed. All of these updates added so much to the game in a way that it never takes away from what Hollow Knight originally was at its core. They were carefully crafted to the point where they feel like they simply always belong with the game. Of course, newer players are less likely to notice these things, but as someone who actively played this game as the updates were still coming out, it's nice to reflect on how far Team Cherry has taken their game. Even now, I still replay it and enjoy it every single time. Hollow Knight is a very special game to me. Not only is it one of my favorite indie games of all time, but it changed how I look at video games as a whole. It is very much worth mentioning that Hollow Knight was made by 3 people: Ari Gibson, William Pellin, and Jack Vine. They used Kickstarter to crowdfund the game, and they ended up raising over $57,000, hence the 57 Precepts of Zote. Speaking of Zote, there are several game-changing choices that you can make in the game. For example, you could, if you so choose, leave Zote to die, and not have to deal with his shit at all. Or, you can either choose to kill or spare the Nailsmith. Menderbug, the fate of some of these NPCs rests in your hands. What will you do? Only you can decide. Though some of them are locked by achievements, so there's that. This is one of those games that just goes to show what a small development team with unrestricted creative freedom can do. And I look forward to the day when I get to play Hollow Knight Silksong. Thank you for watching.